Let me ask you something. Have you ever spent hours studying, reading everything, taking notes, highlighting half the page, and then woken up the next morning and felt like most of it had just evaporated? That happens to almost every student at some point. And the frustrating thing is, it feels like a you problem. Like maybe you just don't have a good memory, or maybe you're not as smart as the other kids in your class. I want to tell you today, clearly and directly, that is almost certainly not true. What's much more likely is that you've been taught to study in a way that works against how your brain is actually built to learn. And once you understand how your brain actually works, everything changes. Let's start with some numbers, because I think they're important. Your brain contains about 86 billion neurons. Each one of those neurons can connect to more than 10,000 others. That means your brain has over 100 trillion potential connections. To put that in perspective, that's more connections than there are stars in the Milky Way, by several orders of magnitude. Now, I'm not sharing that to be motivational. I'm sharing it because it's structurally true. Your brain, the one you're using right now, has the hardware to learn basically anything you'll ever need to learn. The capacity is not the issue. The method is the issue. Think of it this way. Your brain is the hardware. How you study is the software. And most students have never been taught to use the software correctly. Here's something that seems obvious once you hear it, but that most people have never consciously thought about. Every single thought you have is processed through your senses, not just your external senses, your internal ones. When you think about something, you're not thinking about it in the abstract. You're picturing it. You're hearing it in your head. You're feeling something about it. Often all three at the same time. Try it now. Think about where you slept last night. Notice how it's impossible to do that without some kind of mental image, some feeling about the space, maybe even sounds you associate with it. That's not a quirk of your individual brain. That's how all human brains work. The brain stores and retrieves information through sensory representations. The question isn't whether you do this. You do, constantly, automatically. The question is, which senses are you using when you study, and are you using them in a way that actually helps information stick? When it comes to school subjects, 3 senses matter most. Visual, the pictures you build in your mind. Seeing a word spelling. Visualizing a concept. Auditory, the internal dialogue. Talking yourself through a process. Reading in your head. Kinesthetic, the feelings. Emotional connections, the feeling of understanding something. And here's the critical thing. Different types of information are stored more effectively through different sensory channels. Most traditional study methods either ignore this entirely or actively direct students toward the wrong channel for the task. Let's go through the ones you've probably been using. Rereading your notes. When you reread a page of notes, you're processing the information auditorily. You're hearing it internally as you read. The problem? Auditory processing is transient. Sound fades. Without a visual anchor or an emotional connection, the information fades with it. This is why you can read a full chapter, close the book, and remember almost nothing. Repetitive writing. Writing a word or fact out 10 times tries to encode information through repetition. It can work a little, but it's painfully slow and produces weak recall compared to methods that actually engage your visual system. Your brain doesn't store information through sheer repetition. It stores it through meaningful, multisensory experience. Highlighting. Highlighting creates the feeling of engagement without the substance of it. Your eyes move across the page, a color gets applied, and very little is actually processed at a level deep enough to stick. Research consistently shows highlighting is one of the least effective study techniques available, because it just doesn't engage the brain in the way it needs to form lasting memories. Cramming. And then there's cramming, the all-nighter before the exam. The stress response your body produces when you're under that kind of pressure, it actively impairs the deep memory consolidation needed for exam recall. Information crammed under stress tends to evaporate fast. Often, it disappears mid-exam, right when you need it most. Here's what I want you to take away from this. None of this is your fault. These are the methods most students are shown by default. They just happen to work against how your brain is actually built. So what does work? What do effective learning strategies actually have in common? They engage your brain's sensory processing deliberately and meaningfully. Instead of hoping information will stick through passive exposure, they create the conditions for strong, retrievable memory by working with your brain's architecture. Specifically, effective strategies tend to engage the visual system, building clear mental pictures of information rather than just passively hearing it. Create meaningful connections, linking new information to something you already know or feel, which strengthens the neural pathways involved. Use active retrieval, testing what you know, not just reviewing what you've read, forcing your brain to reconstruct memories, which is what makes them durable. Address understanding gaps, finding and resolving the specific points of confusion, rather than moving through material at a surface level. Build emotional context, using confidence, belief, and positive association to create the kind of emotionally anchored memories that last. These aren't theoretical ideas. These principles are the direct foundation for the learning strategies in the LAS app. Let me give you a quick sense of how each strategy connects to what we've just talked about. The spelling strategy works because it uses the visual system to anchor words in long-term memory, rather than relying on auditory repetition that fades. Reading and conceptualization teaches students to build visual and sensory representations of what they read, rather than processing text passively. The understanding strategy locates the specific missing piece, almost always an undefined word, that's blocking genuine comprehension. Building beliefs engages the emotional and kinesthetic system, creating felt confidence that anchors positive learning behaviors. And the TATE revision method uses active retrieval, testing yourself, to force your brain to reconstruct memories, which produces far stronger recall than passive review. Every single strategy is an application of the same underlying principle. The brain learns through meaningful, multisensory engagement. When you use the right sensory channel in the right way for the right type of task, your results improve dramatically, not because you got smarter, because you stopped working against your own brain. So here's the one thing I want you to take away from today. The method you use matters far more than the hours you put in. A student using the right strategies for 2 hours will almost always outperform a student grinding with ineffective methods for 6, not because they're more talented, because they're working with their brain, not against it. The Free Learning Strategies section of the LAS app walks through the strategies, each one grounded in exactly this understanding of how the brain works. You don't need a subscription to access it. You can download it now from the Apple or Google Play stores. And if this video helped you see studying differently, share it with someone who needs it. I'll see you in the next one.